So let's go straight to the first caller, and it is David in Doncaster. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel.
Hi.
Well, my question is, do you think people have overreacted to Donald Trump's call for a temporary moratorium on Muslim immigration to America?
Do I think people have overreacted? Yes, I do think people have overreacted, which doesn't mean I support the tone of everything Donald Trump has said, because I don't. And I've been watching this Republican contest with fascination for months, and I keep thinking the next time Trump goes too far, that'll be the end of it. It'll be curtains. His support will collapse. And to suggest a complete ban on all Muslims coming into America, which it seemed to would even include American businessmen who'd been abroad or whatever. I mean, clearly a massively over-the-top reaction to what is a very serious situation, yes. And yet, the polling that was out yesterday show he's now over 40% in the Republican race, and you know, over 40% in a 15-horse race. What I don't like, David, is this. What I don't like are the same group of people, there are several 100,000 of them in this country, who it seems to me want to ban virtually everybody coming into Britain. I mean, a few years ago, I remember the Emperor Hirohito came on a state visit to Britain. We've seen Robert Mugabe coming to Britain, and now people want to ban Donald Trump. That strikes me as being a massive overreaction. Love him or hate him, Trump is now part of the democratic process in the West.
How do you respond, David?
Well, I agree with Nigel. I mean, if you compare it to the Charlie Hebdo, what happened with regard to Charlie Hebdo, we were told earlier in the year that this massacre had taken place because Muslims didn't like the depiction of Muhammad in the Charlie Hebdo magazine. And you had all these people saying, "I am Charlie." They were wandering around with T-shirts, placards saying that. So it's all right for trendy liberal cartoonists in Charlie Hebdo to have freedom of speech. Donald Trump, who's a right-wing conservative Republican, they don't think he should have freedom of speech at all. So there's a massive contradiction there.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are some double standards. And I have to say, David, that this doesn't just extend to Donald Trump. You know, what we're seeing in our universities now are all sorts of people being no-platformed. Jermaine Greer was no platform by Cardiff University because of a couple of comments she made about the transgender community. You know, we're getting to this situation.
David Starkey was removed from a Cambridge video as well, a promotional video.
Quite extraordinary. And you know, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And we seem to be breeding, particularly in our young people, a new form of intolerance, where some ideas are okay and other ideas should be banned and shut down. And that, I would have thought, particularly on a station like LBC, which believes in free speech and debate, is absolutely wrong.
And to those who say, as regards the potential ban, and there are people, I think it's nearly 430,000, good Lord, people who support this idea, they would say scores of people have been banned from coming to this country since 9/11, all sorts of, they're commonly known as hate preachers. This man is espousing certain division, if not hate. Trump should be barred. How would you respond?
Well, he hasn't encouraged any people being shot or maimed or killed. You know, he has, in response to what is a very serious situation, gone for a proposal that is over the top. Had Trump said, we ought to be very worried about people coming into America from Syria or the Middle East, and we should jolly well make sure, before we grant people refugee status, we do some checks on them, that would have been a perfectly reasonable thing. It's American politics. It's got its own sort of new form of
What would happen if someone had said that in this country last year, Mr. Farage, do you think? If a politician had put their head out above the parapet and said, I think we should bolt the doors in Britain to all Muslims?
I don't think, after the initial outrage of 24 hours, they'd be taken very seriously. After all, there are Muslim people serving in the British Army all over the world. Will we stop them coming back? Say, you know, sense of balance about this. Trump is over the top, but to think that we could ban from coming to our country a man who could be the next president of America is absolutely ridiculous. We move on to Eileen in Thornton Heath. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Nigel. I'd like to know what your opinion is on Jeremy Corbyn attending the fundraising dinner for Stop the War tonight.
Well, he's there with friends. He absolutely should be there. He is
Some of his shadow cabinet wouldn't agree with you, Mr. Farage. Well, they're concerned about the direction of Stop the War. They're concerned about the motivation.
No. But, I mean, Corbyn is a pacifist. He wants to abolish the British Army. He's mates with the IRA, Hezbollah, Hamas. He's gone to the right place tonight. I mean, frankly, this guy is so way out there on the extremes of British politics. And I think the fact he's going to stop the war will reinforce amongst a very large lump of old Labour, the fact that, they've got a guy who, in my opinion, isn't really patriotic, doesn't really believe in this country, and supports a whole range of extreme causes. It's kind of back to David's point from Doncaster, the first caller. Apparently it's quite trendy to be nice about the IRA and Hezbollah and all these people, and that's fine. So I think Corbyn is going to be in very good company, Eileen, and I'm sure he'll have a lovely evening. What do you think?
Well, I think he should attend for probably different reasons to you.
Yeah.
He was the chairman between June 2011 and September, and since becoming leader of the Labour Party, he hasn't changed his views, as you just said. I don't think he's an extremist. I think he's actually a very sincere, loyal person to his country. The rallies and marches of Stop the War that they organise, it enables people like me, and I'm not... I'm slightly on the left, but not that far left, but enables people like me to come along and demonstrate against our country's continued warring policies. They set up the platform for people like me to come up to London and at the rallies and marches.
Yeah. No, listen, I do...
Opposition, but they do, to me, they provide an opportunity for people on the left to come out and protest.
Well, I understand that, Eileen, and like you, I've had grave reservations about some of the wars we've entered into over the course of the last 15 years, in particular Libya, which apparently we bombed to make the whole world safer and is now being taken over by ISIS. So we have made some horrible mistakes, and you're right, they do give a platform for decent people like you to go and protest. However, I suspect what lurks behind it is a little more sinister. That's my view.
Eileen, thank you for the call. Let's move on.
Thank you very much. And we go to Alison, who is calling from Crawley. Good morning.
Good morning. Nigel, I just wondered what your feelings were as to whether BBC ought to remove Tyson Fury from their BBC Sports Personality of the Year.
I thought this might come up.
Alison, this is a man who earns his living beating other adults senseless. That's how he earns his living. He's actually rather good at it. He's a brawler. He's just won the World Championship. It's the first heavyweight boxing champion we've had for a couple of decades. He's a sportsman. He's a boxer. He beats people up. The fact he has his own private opinion strikes me as being ridiculous. And we're back, Alison, to the theme of this debate for this morning.
Yes.
Some opinions are totally acceptable,
yes,
and some aren't. Tyson Fury comes from the traveller community, and people have a lot of sort of prejudices and lack knowledge about the traveller community. They're a very interesting group of people. They have a moral code that is remarkably strong. It's no sex before marriage. They're totally opposed to abortion, and they believe homosexuality is wrong. Actually, their views that in 1950s and 60s Britain were actually mainstream views. And it isn't just Tyson Fury that thinks this. Virtually every Catholic priest in Britain thinks this. Virtually every Muslim imam thinks this. People, Alison, in my opinion, should be able to have their views. And I think the way, and I bet you it's all the same people that want to ban Trump from coming into this country. This attempt to shut him up, this idea he should be kicked off Sports Personality of the Year. It's all going to backfire. I'll make a prediction now. Get down to Ladbrokes. Get your money on, because Tyson Fury is going to win.
Quick response from you, Alison.
Well, I just can't agree. It goes with the territory, if you're a top sportsman, that you're a role model, and he needs to remember that most of the money he earns comes from the general public paying to see him either live or on television, and that gives him a responsibility. There are young people all over this country looking up to him. I don't want to censor his views. He's entitled to think and say what he likes, but he has to take the consequences of that. And one of the consequences of that is that I don't believe a licence fee payer-funded organisation like the BBC should be celebrating his personality. It is not the sportsman or woman of the year, it is the sports personality of the year. There are young people all over this country who are struggling with their sexuality. We have issues with, misogynistic behaviour amongst young people, and this man is being put forward by the BBC as someone whose personality we should celebrate.
Well, that is up to us as people who vote or choose not to vote or vote for somebody else to make our decisions. Alison, I would say this to you. Fury is an evangelical Christian. That is what he thinks. I think he's perfectly entitled to hold those views. Doesn't mean I share them. Because, this is a sort of ridiculous route we go down. Oh, if you defend someone's right to free speech, it means you support what they stand for. I don't. I personally wouldn't make abortion illegal, but there are a lot of people out there, Alison, who think he's right about it.
And just lastly, place some of your words back. You said you think every Catholic priest in the land would agree with Tyson. But that homosexuality is a sin. Do you think that's what Catholic priests would say?
How were you brought up? Which religion brought you up?
I was Anglican.
Yeah, so was I. We were told it was wrong. Though, social attitudes change over time.
But now,
even
Catholic priests today, would you say?
I would think so, wouldn't you? Perhaps we'll get some ringing in.
We'll find out.
But I mean, look, we have big religious communities in this country that hold very strong moral views. And it's not just the Church of England or the Roman Catholic Church. Indeed, it's the Muslim Church and many of the evangelical churches. And these are the views people hold. And we've got to stop hounding people out for having different opinions.
Let's get some of the emails in. This comes from Ernest. What do you think will be the result of David Cameron deciding to renege or delay on a promised referendum because he thinks more people will vote to leave the EU? How can he continue as Prime Minister? All he appears to do is lie and U-turn each time he has to. Nigel Farage.
Well, let's not call him a liar. That's a bit strong for this time of the day. Look, I honestly think that David Cameron has been forced into promising a referendum. It was against every instinct, every bone in his body. I suspect he did it because of UKIP, who he saw as a terrible threat 2 or 3 years ago.
I thought he saw you as fruitcakes.
Earlier on your show, he did laugh at us, didn't he? But as Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they attack you, and then you win. The idea that 27 other countries are unanimously going to agree to giving David Cameron some serious concessions, it's moonshine. And actually, the only substantive thing he's asked for is for us not to have to give benefits to people who come to Britain for up to 4 years. He's not even addressing the big issues.
Water that down, you'll be aware.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
he's got nowhere in Eastern Europe.
He's got nowhere. But the real issues about EU membership are: can Parliament veto an EU law that it doesn't like? Why is it costing us over 50 million quid a day to be part of it? And can we have some control over our borders? Not over benefits, but over our borders. And I don't think the Prime Minister is going to get any of those things. I don't really believe him when he says, if I don't get anything, I might campaign to leave. But you know what? This is politics. You never know.
He met with the Polish Prime Minister, and afterwards, as you probably saw the press conference, despite it would appear them giving absolutely no way at all, Mr Cameron said he'd had excellent discussions. Meaningful change is already underway.
I know.
There's a lot of goodwill. This is an interesting one, Mr Farage. You can see the reforms unfolding in front of your eyes.
I know. I've got some matchsticks in, and I'm watching, and blink and you'll miss it.
All right, we move on.
Thank you very much. We go on to Tony in Westgate. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. You represent Thanet South, and I live in Thanet North. I'll get my words right. Manston Airport is now owned by, the head spokesman is Ray Malone. They call it Stonehill Park now. They're going to build 2,500 homes on there and business industry on there. Down the road at Sandwich, you've got the old Pfizer site, which is an industrial site. Right bang next door to Manston is Columbus Park, an industrial site that is only 1/4 full, that has been there for 15 years. And, it seems like everybody's out to make a fast buck. What have you done? Have you attended their meeting that was down at Ramsgate at Pegwell Bay to find out, can compulsory purchase be made on Manston Airport?
Just fill us in some of the background on this, Mr Farage. I know that Manston's been mothballed effectively, hasn't it?
Yeah, funny enough, I was just talking to your previous guest, Zach Goldsmith.
Oh, right.
Out on the corridor. He agrees with me. We're talking about a shortage of airport capacity, and there is a very large strip of tarmac in East Kent currently being unused. It's called Manston Airport, where planes take off over the sea.
I was going to say, you can get to it over water.
Absolutely. And interestingly, the majority of the local population would love to see Manston up and running and active.
So we need a high-speed rail link, wouldn't we, to make it?
At the moment, the high-speed rail link almost goes all the way. It's about 1 hour, 1 minute at the moment.
Right.
But if you completed the line... it's not that bad. Yeah. But if you completed the line from Ashford down to Manston, it would be 45, 47 minutes, something like that. Which is like
a Stansted sort of affair.
Exactly. Tony,
Why has this never come up, Mr Farage? Why is there
I keep trying to raise it and people just ignore it. I'm not quite sure why. Tony, we UKIP won control of Thanet District Council in the elections in May of this year, and we said we would give Manston Airport every possible opportunity to reopen. To do that, we have to apply for a compulsory purchase order, and to make that work, we have to have an aviation company working with us who are prepared to indemnify the residents of Thanet from financial risk. And at the moment, the first proposed indemnity partner that we were trying to work with, frankly, haven't played the game. So we're looking around to find somebody else.
What do you mean by haven't played the game? What does that
have
mean?
not been prepared to stump up financially. So we're looking for somebody else. My worry, Tony, is this, that if Manston is turned into a giant housing estate, that will be worth an awful lot of money to the developers. And I suspect there's some very big capital out there doing what it can to try and scupper Manston being put back to being an airport. But you have my absolute word, Tony, that our council leader, Chris Wells, down there is doing everything he can. We want Manston to reopen. And as Zach just said to me, Zach Goldsmith said to me in the corridor, rather than waiting 5 years for a runway or 20 years for Boris Island, this could be up and running within a few weeks.
A quick response from you.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much indeed. We move on to other... So literally, in practical, 12 months, you could have that function. Is it big enough to take jumbos and things like that?
Oh, Lord, I think I'm right in saying it's the longest runway in the country. I mean, it's a vast...
And think of the jobs that you create down
absolutely.
there. And it's a job black spot, I think, that part of East Kent.
Well, I mean, don't forget, over the last 30 years, the mines have closed, the ferries have closed.
The Sally line, was
that's right. That's right. It's Dunkirk. Yeah, so life's been pretty grim.
Yeah.
And it just is a complete source of mystery to me that we finished up in this position. But as I say, the big money would love to see tens of thousands of houses on it.
With nobody doing any jobs, of course.
What's the point? Absolutely.
We move on.
We do. We go to Sadiq in Ilford. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Nick. Good morning, Nigel.
Morning, sir.
Hi.
1 point and one question, if I'm allowed to.
Yep.
Firstly, the question. Nigel, aren't you really the poor man's version of Donald Trump? In the sense that you really do think what he says, and you probably agree with him, because you said pretty much the same thing about Syrian Muslim refugees last year or the year before.
Did I? How interesting. Right. And your observation?
And my observation is that I think it's outrageous that you get the airtime that you do and you call Jeremy Corbyn an extreme politician when you only have, I think, 1 or 2 MPs in the House of Parliament.
Well, Sadiq, you can look at it how you want, mate. We have a Conservative government with a majority who got exactly 3 times the number of votes that UKIP got, and we got 1 MP. I can't help the system, but whether you like it or don't like it, UKIP is the 3rd biggest political force in this country, quite comfortably. Interestingly, since those elections, and despite the disappointment, our opinion poll ratings are even higher. And there are a lot of people that support us. And Sadiq, I'm sorry to disappoint you. If your prejudice is that you want UKIP to be an extremist organisation that's against all sorts of people because of their religion or their colour, I'm really sorry to disappoint you. We are none of those things. We are a very, very inclusive political party. And, when you come to vote in the London Assembly elections next May, and I'm sure you won't vote for us, but have a look at our list. See the sheer diversity of people that stand for UKIP. There's been this attempt made by sections of the media and our political class to paint UKIP out to be extreme, and that's because they'd rather do that to us than deal with our arguments, which make so many people feel uncomfortable.
Sadiq, a quick response?
Yeah, well, you haven't addressed the question of are you the poor man's version of Donald Trump? Because you said exactly the same thing, pretty much, about Syria.
I said nothing of the kind. I'm sorry. It's difficult, Sadiq. If you come on and you've got a sort of preconceived idea of what I said a year ago, and it's not true.
Did you or did you not say that only Christian Syrian refugees should come into the United Kingdom?
No, I said we should give preferential treatment to Christians because they've got literally nowhere to go. And if you go back through history, you will find that very often the key determinant for whether somebody qualifies to be a refugee or not is their religion. People are persecuted for their religious views. Yeah. And I have said... In fact, it's very interesting. I was the first and you're going to hate this. I was the first politician in Britain, Sadiq, in 2013 to say we should offer refugee status to some genuine refugees. I said it long before all of the others. That doesn't mean I'm not concerned, and I'm certainly concerned when I see that Germany has taken in 1 million people this year and not actually been able to security check a single one of them. There are very legitimate concerns that we may well be importing terrorism. So let's be grown up about this. Let's face a real threat. But we don't need, in dealing with this, to go to the extremes that Donald Trump has done.
All right, quick one-sentence wrap-up from you, Sadiq, before we move on.
Yeah, I'd just like Nigel to condemn what Donald Trump has said, really.
Should we tar and feather him? Should we ban him from the country? Or should we say that he's somebody in a political race who's gone way over the top? I have said that again and again and again.
Sadiq, thank you for your call. Where do we go now, Mr. Farage?
We go to David in Enfield. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Far away.
Nigel, I believe David Cameron is misleading the country about the levels of immigration, because I saw some government figures yesterday saying that in 2014, 768,000 national insurance numbers were issued to foreign nationals, which was up 155,000 from the previous year. So that means we've had 1.3 million foreign workers registered for national insurance within the last 2 years. Do we know how many of these workers are claiming in-work tax credits or housing benefits?
David, you're on the same lines as me. I don't believe the immigration figures either. They're based on passenger surveys. I suspect the real figures are far higher than we realise. And you're absolutely right. There is a massive discrepancy between the number of national insurance numbers given out and the numbers officially being shown to have come in the official figures. I keep asking this question. Why is there this discrepancy? And I keep being told that some people book a national insurance number ahead of time before they come to Britain. David, like you, I don't believe a word of it. And it's funny, isn't it? We've got a housing crisis. We've got a health crisis. We've got a chronic shortage of primary school places coming up over the course of the next few years. And no one, David, makes the connection between that and our population going through the roof. The official population in Britain is about 64.5 million. That's the official stat. I'm told that some of the big supermarkets suspect it's nearer 68 million.
Really?
So, David, you're absolutely right. You're on the money. And by the way, if you can find out the answer to this before I do, please give me a ring and let me know.
Quick response from you, David.
Well, yes, Nigel, I believe a lot of these people are, because of the low wages they're earning, are receiving in-work tax credits and housing benefits. And there's no way David Cameron is ever going to get the Polish Prime Minister to agree that these benefits would be curtailed. It's just not possible.
No, it isn't going to happen. And that's why, even though his renegotiation was incredibly modest, in that he only asked for one substantive thing, it's looking increasingly clear that he's not going to get it. And I think, I think the whole tenor and the whole tone of this referendum is changing, because about a third of the country hate the whole Brussels thing. About a third of the country either quite like it or think it's okay. And the middle third of the country are not happy with the status quo and want us to have a reformed relationship. And if David Cameron cannot win any significant concessions, then we are going to leave.
Let's do some emails, text and tweeted questions as well. This comes from Leonard at Tower Bridge. Nigel Farage has just mentioned Angela Merkel. I've read this week that she's in political trouble in Germany. Does Nigel Farage agree with that?
Well, I mean, quite remarkable, Leonard. She's just been made the Time magazine Woman of the Year. I mean, who's on the panel? I mean,
the terrorist leader was in second place.
I know, that's right. I think she's made a disastrous error of judgment. I think this...
But will she pay for it eventually? How are voters towards it?
She may pay for it. There is one Eurosceptic party in Germany. It's called the AfD, the Alliance for Deutschland, and they are now on about 10% of the vote, so they're beginning to climb in the polls. But she's been in such an unassailable position for the last 10 years that for her own party to ditch her, or for somebody to seriously beat her at the next election, it's going to take some doing.
And what do we take from Marine Le Pen's success in France? While we're talking about European politics, Mr. Farage.
Well, it's a bit of a mistake for people to say that Le Pen's success last Sunday was purely down to Paris. Actually, that party, that brand, has been building steadily over the course of the last few years. I mean, I've never been a fan of the National Front. The French National Front. It directly descends from the Vichyite times in the war. It's been deeply anti-Semitic all the way through. And And, of course, Jean-Marie Le Pen, her father, I mean, a bit of a political monster. She's taken it over. She's got rid of the old man. She's kicked out some of the Holocaust deniers. She's tried to put the party on a much more sensible footing, and she's reaping the reward. And this Sunday is the second round, and we're probably going to see the French National Front controlling 2 of the big regions. Her economics is extreme left-wing. It's high tax, it's protectionism. I think if she became the president of France in 2017, I think the country would be an even worse economic mess than it currently is. But where she is utterly sincere is in wanting to take France out of the euro and France outside the European Union, and to have a Europe where nation states trade together. And it's interesting that we're seeing parties, we call her on the right, obviously, but equally, we got hard left parties on the march too. Syriza, who took over the government in Greece. Podemos, who've been leading big street protests in Spain. So we're seeing all sorts of big political reaction against a European project that to many people just isn't working.
Let's move back to the calls.
Yeah, we do. We go to Tom in Norfolk. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
Hi, good,
morning,
thanks.
Tom.
What have you got?
Basically, my view is that the establishment, the political establishment in our country is hiding everything from us. Everything that is true has been hidden. I mean, I looked yesterday at what Donald Trump said yesterday or the day before about the police in the UK being worried. As I can say, the next police officer, still with loads of contacts, not just in London but across the UK, the guys are worried. There are big Sharia areas and areas where they are very, very worried about going into. I mean, for instance, they can't walk around in half blues, in civvies and with half a uniform for fear of someone seeing them and grabbing them. But it's made to believe that Boris Johnson said, it's rubbish, we can't believe that. That's complete and utter rubbish. But it isn't rubbish, it's a fact. And things like that are being hidden from the British electorate. It's just not right.
Well, let's see. Do you agree when Mr. Trump said that there are parts of London that are no-go, police are fearful to go there?
I don't know the answer to that. Tom, as an ex-police officer, tells me that's true, and I'm prepared to listen to what Tom's got to say. I don't know. What worries me, Tom, though, isn't just the fact that perhaps police officers are scared of going into certain areas. What worries me is we have in parts of our towns and cities got effectively a parallel society developing. I was in Oldham last week. There was a by-election. I tell you what was really interesting. Oldham reminded me of Belfast. Where one side of the street's Catholic and the other side of the street's Protestant, and the kids all go to different schools, don't play football together, are brought up to hate each other. I mean, and we've seen what that's led to in Northern Ireland. Believe me, Oldham's like that.
What is the division?
One side of the street is white British. The other side of the street is Bangladeshi or Pakistani, with a very large number of people not speaking English, not being encouraged to speak English, kids not doing well at school, families, reliant on benefit and living really pretty poor, miserable lives. And literally, never the twain shall meet. And actually, if you think about it, it's not surprising that in an environment like that, sometimes extreme ideas take hold. So my worry, Tom, if police can't go to all the areas, that's bad. But what is worse is the creation of a parallel society, the fact there are 83 Sharia courts up and running and active in this country, and the fact that 80% of Muslim marriages now take place outside UK civil law, giving the women almost no protection whatsoever. So Tom, what we've got to be talking about is let's control our borders, let's stop the mass influx of people from all over the world that are coming in, but we're going to have to try our absolute damnedest to integrate the societies that we've got.
How do you break that down? How do you get those two sides of the street in Oldham playing football with each other and talking?
Well, it's not easy. I mean, clearly it's not easy. And I think, the government is trying a little bit to say, well, faith schools must have a percentage of other communities. And I think all of that does make sense. But ultimately, we're going to have to make sure that we enforce one law for everybody in this country, and we've not been doing it.
But when you just said let's tighten up our borders, aren't you saying roughly what Donald Trump said? You don't want any Bangladeshis coming into the country?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that uncontrolled immigration, whether it comes from Poland or Bangladesh or whatever it is, means, Nick, that people live together in ghettos, in communities, and we don't get mixing. Actually, up until Mr. Blair came to power, we actually had the most integrated immigrant communities in the whole of Europe, because the numbers that had come since the war had averaged about 30,000 a year net. It wasn't a massive figure, and people were able to integrate. Now it's over 1/3 net, and I say that, although one of our callers this morning thinks it's probably quite a lot higher. Very, very difficult to integrate if you're doing it like that.
In Austria they're putting up chain link fences in their border with Slovenia. If Britain was connected, would we need fences?
We've got the English Channel. We're jolly lucky.
We've got the tunnel underneath.
Well, we have, yeah, but we have got, I mean, it's not as easy to cross the border into the United Kingdom, and yet we have surrendered our ability to control who comes into our country, because effectively the British passport is now something that is held by 500 million people.
Do you think there'll be more fences put up across Europe, as the Austrians are doing?
Well, I think that when
we should be in the chain link fence business, shouldn't we, really?
Come on, well, quite. I mean, the free movement of people was a wonderful idea, but unfortunately it's now become the free movement of Kalashnikovs and the free movement of terrorists, and I think the people have had enough. Those AK-47s that caused all that killing and misery in Paris had come in the back of a car from Berlin, and at no point between Berlin and Paris had that car been stopped.
We're time for one quick one, I think.
One quick one, and we go to Robert in Ealing for our last caller of the morning.
Nigel, do you believe the BBC are still aiming to keep you quiet, UKIP?
Look,
you've got on quite a number of their shows on occasion.
I think the BBC have been guilty of bias over the course of the last couple of decades. Issues like climate change, immigration, Europe, where they've only allowed one side of an argument consistently to get put on the news at 10. But I think, to be honest with you, Robert, I think the British public and the media are now on their backs and are saying to them things must improve. I always get shouted down by UKIP supporters if I'm even vaguely nice about the BBC. But I think the BBC have got a lot better. I think their coverage of the issue, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think it's better. And I think they know something, Robert, which is this. The British referendum on EU membership is going to be a major global political event. The whole world is going to be watching. And if the BBC make a Horlicks of it, then their chances of getting licence renewal and the £3 to £4 billion a year they get would be diminished. I think the BBC are going to be a lot more careful. So no whinging from me, Robert.
Lastly, Edna in Barrow. Can Nigel Farage explain to me, we're having money taken away from flood defences up here when we're sending more money to a country like India. This cannot be something with which he agrees.
No, we're spending billions on stopping climate change by building wind turbines in Africa and all the rest of it. And it's amazing, isn't it? Our foreign aid budget...
But we're cutting flood defence.
Oh, yes. Well, we don't care about our own people, obviously. Our foreign aid budget next year is going to be bigger than our policing budget. We've got our priorities badly wrong, Edna. And, yeah, I have to say, natural disasters do occur from time to time, but the extent to which we're not protecting ourselves against flooding for what is a relatively small sum of money compared to the foreign aid budget, Edna, I think it's shameful.
This is an honest process, and I have to make sure it's an honest process, and we all, and journalists, have to make sure it's an honest process. If it is an honest process, Heathrow is now off the agenda. We're now looking at the alternatives. We're looking at competition rather than monopoly. That means investing in links to and from Gatwick, to and from Stansted.